Hey guys, what's up? Hope you guys are doing well today. How's everyone?
There's 5 of us, but yeah, we're all doing well.
We'll just wait for a few minutes for like a bunch of people to turn up, and then we'll get on with the session. Hey guys, welcome to the session. We're just waiting for a few more minutes for everyone to turn up. Hey guys, welcome to the session on React. I'm going to start presenting now. And just a note to all our attendees on YouTube, please feel free to ask any questions and we'll do our best to answer them. Same goes for you guys here in Teams. So let me just begin. I'm going to show you a very short presentation that goes over what we're going to cover today, and we'll jump straight into the code. So I hope you guys can see right now. Yeah, I'll just start presenting. So welcome to DSC-VIT's DevCamp series. We're going to be doing web development with React today. I'm sure many of you have heard what React is and how popular it is, but you might not know exactly how it's used or what you can use to build. So we're going to cover some of those topics here today. Very first question is, why React? Why not use just plain HTML, CSS, JavaScript to make your web page? Well, React offers several advantages over the traditional method of doing things, such as code reuse with components. We'll see that when we get to it. We'll be showing how to use components today. Officially supported by Facebook. So Facebook has been developing React for several years since its release now. It was originally launched in 2013. And Facebook uses it themselves, and a lot of big companies are using it. So you know that it's not going to just stop support anytime soon. And it integrates well with TypeScript. So for those of you who have heard of TypeScript, this can be a plus point for you, because TypeScript is considered to be better than JavaScript in terms of programming. And it has great performance, so your application will be very nice and responsive and fast in loading times and all that for your clients or whoever you're building it for. So that's just a short overview of why you might want to use React for your future web development projects. Let's get into what we're actually going to cover in this session today. We're going to learn the fundamentals of JSX. How we can use JavaScript variables inside the JSX markup, how we can actually style our JSX, or basically how we can style our React application and components, how to actually reuse code using components, state management with React hooks, how we are going to make API requests from inside our web application so you can fetch data from some remote API or backend or whatever, and how we can cover different pages in our React app using routing. So don't be afraid or put off if any of those terms feels unfamiliar to you, because we're going to cover all this. I'm going to explain in detail what each one of these things are. And yeah, without further ado, let's actually get into building the application. So the very first thing that you want to do is, I hope all of you have Node.js installed, because that's what we're going to need for this. If you don't have Node.js installed, you can just go over and just Google for Node.js install and you'll pretty much get it. You can just see a bunch of downloads. You have it for Windows, Mac, Linux, everything. If you're on a Linux, you know how to install it. If you're on a Windows or a Mac, just download these two and you're good to go. But I'm assuming you guys have it installed. If not, you can just download it right now and follow along. So open up the terminal. On Windows, PowerShell. On macOS, the whatever is your favorite terminal. And yeah, so you just want to head over to the directory that where you want to create the project and run the following commands. So I'm going to create a directory called, let's say, web projects, and I'm going to go in there and I'm going to run the following command: npx create -react -app, and you want to give your app a name. So I'm just going to call it my app and I'm going to run it. So this might take a while for you guys, and while it's actually happening, I'm going to show you what we are going to build today. It might not look great from the visual perspective, but in terms of using React, it's a lot of concepts and almost everything you need to build a professional React application yourself. So for that, I'm just going to open up a new tab over here. I'm going to clone something. Yeah, I'm just going to clone it into this. So if you're wondering what I'm cloning, is like I prepared this project beforehand so I can show you guys, but we're going to build everything from scratch here. And the repo link will be available to you guys at the end of the session. Yeah. Do let me know if your npx create react app command has finished, so we can actually move on. So as for the questions, can I please share my views on Angular versus React? It really depends. So React is very flexible in terms of how you want to use it. So Facebook considers React to be a library, not a framework, whereas Angular is a framework. And Angular forces you to do things in a specific way, whereas with React you can pretty much use anything you want. You can use whatever you want with React, and in fact Microsoft uses React and Angular at the same time. So you can use React with Angular, but you just use whatever you feel right is for you. That's pretty much what I want to say. Yeah. And yes, knowing them both is a plus. Knowing as much stuff as you can is always a plus. Anyway, so to get started with this, I'm just going to run the command npm start. What this will do is it'll open up a window and it'll show you our application. Yeah, so as you can see here, we have a bunch of Pokemon here. Might seem a bit silly, but yeah, I love Pokemon. Anyway, this data is being fetched from a remote API. It's fetching like the top 100 Pokemon. I mean, we could fetch more, but I just use 100 for this session. So we are fetching the first 100 Pokemon, and whenever we click on any of them, it's just going to show us the name of that Pokemon. So in a sense, this is kind of a Pokédex, but if you look at it, we are doing a lot of very interesting things over here. We are fetching data from an API. We are somehow storing it in our memory, and we are handling routes. For example, as you can see up here in the URL bar, if we go to like a different URL, it's showing, it's actually fetching that particular Pokemon's data. This is also a network request. So we are making multiple network requests. We're handling state. We are reusing components, all that stuff. So so this might not look like much, but it's actually a full-blown React app. And that's what we're going to build today. But I hope you guys have like ran that command and it's complete for you, because we're going to get on with it. Right. So just go over into that directory and open up your favorite code editor. So I'm going to use Visual Studio Code. You can use Sublime Text, Vim, Notepad++, whatever you want. I recommend using Visual Studio Code because it has like really helpful extensions that will help you out with this. I hope you can see what I'm showing on the screen. Is it visible?
Yeah, we can see it.
On YT, there's some request to zoom in. So.
All right. I'll just zoom in a bit. Cool. What just happened? Wow. Okay, VS Code being a little funny. I know what's happening. Yeah. Yeah, I hope that's better. I've zoomed in as much as I can, and we're just going to start with it. Alright, so this is your code, and I've opened the app.js file over here. And you might be wondering what is all this and how are we returning what looks like HTML from a function. So yeah, I'll just get into that in a second, but at the very first, I want to show you all these files over here. Now, a lot of these files are not really important for you right now. For example, app.test.js. So this is basically just used in big companies or companies in general for testing whether what you have written actually is what is expected. So as of now, you're not going to need it. So it's fine if you just delete that file. In fact, I'm just going to do it right now. And same goes for all this setup test.js, and going to move it to dash. Alright, so to start your React app, you want to run the command npm start. Right? npm start. I'll just put it on YouTube, or one of you guys can put it. So in the same way that I showed you that app, this is going to open another window for us in our browser, and look what it says: edit app.js and save to reload. So this is the very first screen that you'll see if you've just created a React application. And it already feels good, like we're building something, but this is not what we want. We want a Pokédex, so let's get on with it. Alright, so they said we can edit app.js and see the changes show up. So let me actually change this thing. I'm just gonna say hello world, and let's see if it actually changed. And yes, indeed. So what we change in app.js actually turns up in our browser window. But how exactly is this happening? What's going on behind the scenes? For that, we first have to inspect this app function and see what all this HTML or so-called HTML actually is. So what this is actually JSX, which I mentioned in the presentation. This is not HTML. It looks like HTML, and it looks like HTML for a reason, because React developers wanted it to be familiar to web developers who are already experienced with HTML, but it has a few differences. For example, all these class name attributes, you might not have seen them in, you probably won't have seen them in your plain HTML applications. And the reason for this is just applying a class to this div. And the reason it's called class name is because class is a reserved keyword in JavaScript, so you can't use the class keyword, so you have to call it class name. But in the later versions of React, I think the latest right now, I'm not sure the version, but it allows you to use just class. But in general, you'll see a lot of class names in React applications. Then you might see this curly brace syntax. We'll get to that in just a moment. But yeah, in general, what JSX is, it's a form of HTML. It's a dialect, you can say, which is used for building UI inside React applications. It's you can return it from functions, and what is happening is behind the scenes, all this will be actually converted to JavaScript. You'll have method calls, when you're actually typing stuff like div or image or anything. When you're React is actually converting this to function calls such as react.create div, react.create image, whatever. And that basically shows up on your screen as what we are seeing here. But enough about those nitty-gritty details. In effect, this behaves almost like HTML, and we'll point out a few caveats on how to use it later, but yeah, that's pretty much it. Now coming to a second point, what are these curly brace things? What is this curly brace syntax? This is a form of, I don't know, let's call it interpolation, variable interpolation, where you can use JavaScript variables inside your JSX. So for example, suppose I wanted this to say hello, whatever my name was, and I wanted to use a variable to do it. That's a bit of a contrived example, but I can show you how it's done. So let's just create a new variable here. Let's call it name equals my name is Amol. So I'm just going to type Amol. You can use whatever you want. And I'm just going to replace this void with this curly brace syntax and put a name there. And now let's go and visit our application. And as we can see, it shows us hello Amol over here. So this is basically a way of using JavaScript variables inside our JS text, and it's going to be very useful when we start building our app. So yeah, let's get to that app right now. But before that, just let me know if you guys have any doubts. I'll do my best to answer them. You guys on YouTube as well, feel free to ask questions. All right, looks like everyone is doing well, everyone is understanding, I'm glad. So let's get on with it. We're going to start building our app. So the very first thing we have to know is what is a component. I mentioned components earlier, but we don't know what they are. So let's just create a component right here, and then I'll explain what it is. So let's say I want to have, I just want to show my name for now, deviating a bit from what we're going to build in the end, but let's just say I want to show my name for now, but I want it to be dynamic. I want it to be controlled by something like a variable. For that, we can use the JavaScript syntax, but what if I want to do it like multiple times? What if I want my name to appear 10 times and I want each name to be different and things like that? So we can use components for that. Components are used for code reuse in React, and they can be created like this. So in its barest sense, a component is a function. You can also use class-based components, but most people have taken to using functional components because they're much easier to use, and React hooks are way more popular than class-based components right now. Also, as to what React hooks are, we'll get to that as well in this session. So let's just call this name because it's a component that's going to show us a name. And here we can just return. Don't forget these parentheses. We use these parentheses when we want to return some JSX. So parentheses, and then you want to place one root element. Every component in React needs to have just one root element. There cannot be more than one. So you have to use just one. And this root element can be anything. It can be a div. It can be a span. It can be header. It can be anything. But if you don't want like extra components, you can actually use just this syntax. So you can have these empty tags, and that'll act as a root component. So we're just going to use that for now, and yeah, that's our root component. And maybe here inside a span we're going to have our name. So for now, let's just hard code it in. This is my name, so I'm just going to put it in there. And now we created this component, but how to actually use it? Well, you use it like you would use any HTML element, and that is just by using angular brackets. So something like this. And this just used our component inside our root app. And let's just go and take a look at what our web page looks like right now. Yeah, that's pretty good. Like, we can see my name over here. If it's not visible to you, we can just zoom in. But yeah, anyway, my name is over here. But as I said, we want this to be controlled by a variable, let's say. So components let us do that. They let us reuse behavior or UI and just change the configuration a little bit and get the same behavior for a lot of things. So let's change this up a little bit. Over here inside name, this is a function after all. I'm just going to add one argument and I'm going to call it props. And inside span, instead of using my name hard-coded, I'm going to put in the curly brace interpolation syntax. I'm just going to type in props.name. And what I'm going to do in this name component over here is I'm going to pass in an attribute called name. I'm going to equals, and I'm going to pass in my name. Let's just go back and see what's happened to our UI. As we can see, it's pretty much the same over here, like not much difference, not much has changed. But what if we were to add another component, the same name component, and change up the name? So I don't know, let's just call it random name over here. Yeah, so as you can see, this is actually turning up in our markup syntax, right? So we have reused the same UI just by passing in a different variable, and that is actually the power of React. So you can reuse your code, you can reuse behavior, you can reuse your user interface, and it becomes so much easier for you to develop web applications. Yeah, so that's what a component is, but we're not going to use this component. And please feel free to ask any questions right now, because components can, just be a little confusing sometimes. All right, I guess no one has any questions about components. I'm glad everyone's following along. Let's just go back to our code and remove this. All right, so now we actually want to get started on what we are going to build. So the very first thing is, how do we actually make an API call? Well, we can use the fetch function. There's a built-in function in JavaScript, and you can find it in most modern browsers. So we're going to be using the fetch function here today. But how do we actually use it? How do we set the state for it? How do we, like, the data might be returned, but we actually want it to be shown to the user. So we have to hold it in memory somewhere. How are we actually going to use that? So before we introduce how to make an API call, first I'm going to introduce the concept of states to you. So in its barest terms, state is just like a variable. State is just a variable, but it's a special variable, because whenever you change a state, your UI will re-render. So if you're using the state somewhere and the state changes, your UI will update to show the updated state. And I'm just going to demonstrate that right now. And the way you can create a state variable is used with the following syntax. So we're just going to declare two variables over here. One, and this is going to be an array destructuring. So for now, let's just call the state, I don't know, name again. And the second one is going to be called set name. So this is actually a function which we can use to update the name variable, and we're just going to assign it to use state. Notice this import here, we're importing use state from React, and inside use state, we're just going to pass in that what the default value of this variable should be, which is blank for now. Okay. And let's just actually show this name over here. And we go to a web page and we see there's nothing. Excuse me. We see there's nothing, right? It's just blank. That's because this default value of this name is blank. So if we change the default value to something like, again, my name, we can see it in the browser, right? But we're going to keep it blank for now. And what I'm actually going to do over here, I'm going to add a button. I'm going to add a button that says, click me. And here we're going to do something interesting. We're going to call a function when this button is clicked. So if you're familiar with HTML, you might remember the Onclick attribute, and it's pretty much the same in JavaScript, in React, and that's what we're going to use. So we're going to do Onclick equals curly braces, because remember, whenever we want to pass anything that is JavaScript, we use curly braces. So curly braces, arrow function syntax. This arrow function actually takes in one argument, but we don't need to use it for this. So I'm just, I'm not taking it in. I don't want unused variables, so I'm not taking it in. Anyway, inside this function, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call the set name function, and I'm going to set the name to my name. Or wait, let's just set the default state to my name, and let the new name be new name. Right. And now we can go back and we can see this button over here, right? We can see my name and we can see the button. And when we click it, it changes to new name. So let me just explain what happened here. When you click this click me button, this function was called set name. So as I said, set name is used to actually update the value of this variable called name. And as you can see, it was updated, and as soon as it was updated, this return was called again. So basically what happened is, whenever the state changes, this return function, this function is called again, and the entire UI is re-rendered. So anything that changes is re-rendered. And by re-rendered, basically I just mean that React calculates the new HTML. Like I told you, right, that JSX is converted to JavaScript, which again in turn creates HTML. So that's what is happening. It just calls all those functions again with the new value of this variable. And since that value is new, it gets updated in our UI. So you don't need to remember all this. All you need to remember is that whenever state is updated, your UI will also change. And that is pretty much what state is. So if you have any questions as to what state is, just ask me and I'll solve your doubts. How to keep switching between names when we click? Interesting question, Raghav. So you can add something like an if condition. So suppose you want to suppose you want to keep toggling between these two names. You can do something like if this terrible code, don't use it, but just as an example. So if name equals amok set name new name, else set name amok. Yeah. And now if we were to go back to our app here, and we can just click, and every time it will keep toggling between these two. Pretty much it. Pretty straightforward. We can do basically whatever we want. But yeah. Alright, looks like we have no other doubts, so let's get on with the session. Now what we want to do is we want to make an API call. Let's just get rid of all the stuff that we've created. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another state variable. I'm going to call it Pokemon and set Pokemon. So this is very similar to what we did before. We used array destructuring to create a state. But in this case, our Pokemon are going to be an array. An empty array for now, but an array. And now we're going to make an API call using a very special hook called the use effect hook. So all these use state, use blah blah, all those are called hooks. I don't know why they're called hooks, but they're called hooks. So that's what we mean when we say React hooks. Anyway, we're going to call the use effect hook. So basically what this does is whenever your UI is loaded, it will execute this function based on some parameters that we passed to it. So the first parameter is a function which will be executed, and the second parameter is an array of dependencies. So by dependencies I mean whenever any of these anything passed in here changes. So if I were to pass in Pokemon here, whenever Pokemon changes, this function would be called again. But I'm just going to be passing in an empty array. And basically what an empty array is, like, since there is nothing in here to change, this is only going to be called once, right? Just once whenever the page is loaded. And in here, I'm just going to use a bit of the fetch syntax. So basically what fetch is, it makes an API request to a backend and it fetches some data from there, and we can do whatever we want with that data. So the bare minimum syntax for this is like just fetch with a URL, and the URL that we are going to use is for this API called Poke API. Yeah, so pokeapi.co. And this is a URL that we're going to call /Pokemon. And I just want it to be limited to 100. So this is actually what we're going to call. So the top 100 Pokemon, we're just going to fetch them. 100 items. So let's just copy this. I'm going to fetch this. Oops. /Pokemon (limit equals 100). So yeah, this is going to send a GET request, but it's going to return a promise. I'm hoping you know what promises are because you've learned JavaScript. So yeah, this is going to return a promise. So if you know about promises, then you know that we can use async await syntax or .then syntax. For now, just to keep things simple, I'm going to be using .then syntax. So .then, it gives us a response. So let's just call this variable over here response. But this response is not in a JavaScript object format. So I'm just going to call it response.json. And what this does is it creates a JavaScript object from the response and returns another promise. So again, we chain the .then. And over here, let's just call it the body. With the arrow function to the body, what we're going to do is call the set Pokemon function body dot. And if you notice here, the response that we are getting, what we want is actually in results. Like there's other variables over here like count, next, previous. We don't want those. We just want the results because that's the array of Pokemon. So I'm just going to set Pokemon body dot results. And yeah, let me just make this easier for you to see. So what this is going to do is every time we load the page, it's going to send a GET request to this endpoint. It's going to convert it to JSON, and then it's going to call the set Pokemon function with the results from this API request. And if you actually want to see what we're getting, we can just console log this out. So console.log Pokemon, and then we can go over to our React app and check what's getting logged to the console. And as you can see, we have an array here of 100 elements, name and URL. We are just concerned with the name mostly over here. But yeah, now that we know we're getting a response, like we know that our state is being set, we know this Pokemon is an array of Pokemon, we can remove this console.log and we can look at how to actually render an array. Now this is a slightly confusing part, so I'm hoping that you have questions, because if you don't, then I'm very suspicious. Either you're being, either you're slacking off or you already know React. So anyway, this variable over here, Pokemon, it's an array. So what we are going to do is we are going to call a function called map on an array. If you don't know what array.map is, we're just going to take a look at it right now. And the best place to find stuff like this is the Mozilla Developer Network. So yeah, that's pretty much what map is. And what map does is it takes in an array and it returns an array of something else. Basically, it transforms the array. For example, I'll just zoom in a little bit over here so you can see. So suppose we have an array over here of some numbers, and we've converted them to something else using map. So map takes in a function, in this case an arrow function. So what it says is x is an individual element of this array, and you want to convert it to x multiplied by 2. So what this will do is it will return an array where every element has been multiplied by 2, and as you can see, the expected output here is the multiple of 2 of everything inside this array 1. And we're just going to use this map function. So what we're going to do over here is we are going to take in the list of Pokemon, we're going to map it. So here I'm just going to use a variable p for Pokemon, arrow function, and I'm going to return a React element from it. So this is something that you can do in React. You can map over an array of whatever and return React elements. But remember, as with anything JavaScript, you have to use this curly braces to do it. And also remember that we have to use this parentheses when returning a multi-line React component. So that's what we're going to do. I'm just going to pass in a div over here. And inside this div, I'm going to use the interpolation syntax and use p dot name. So what we're doing over here is we are mapping over the list of Pokemon and we are converting it to a JavaScript element, sorry, a JSX element, where we are putting the name of each Pokemon inside that element. So if we go back to our web page right now, let's see what we can see. And yeah, as expected, we see a list of all those Pokemon over here. We fetched a list, we mapped over it, and we returned a component. So stuff like this is really easy to do in React, and this is another reason why React is so popular among developers. But we don't just want to show our name, right? We don't just want to show the name of the Pokemon. We actually want it to take us to a different route. So instead of using a div, let's use an anchor tag. And inside the href, we're going to put in fact, let's not put in this. We're going to pass in some JavaScript expressions. For that, we use the curly braces. And we're going to use string interpolation inside JavaScript. So for that, we use this backticks. The backticks are the symbol above the tilde, or you can just, it's basically the first key in your number row. So yeah, backticks. slash, and we're going to use a variable in here. So for using variables, you use the syntax dollar and then curly braces, and you pass in the variable over here. Again, we're going to use p.name. So what this is going to do is whenever we click on this a tag, it's going to take us to slash and that name. And let's see if it actually works right now. Whoa, that doesn't look good. We'll fix that in just a second, but let's try clicking on one of these. So yeah, as you can see, it took us to slash Blastoise, but it's not actually doing anything because we haven't configured React to show something different on different pages. So yeah, let's actually fix this UI over here. I'm going to be using a bit of CSS now. And that brings us to our next topic right now, which is how to style React components or how to style JSX. As you can see over here, we have imported ./app.css. If you're used to plain HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you might remember that you use link, like the link inside your head, the head tag, to actually bring in your JavaScript, to bring in your CSS. But in React, what we do is we just import it, and all that CSS is automatically applied to everything in that file. And that's so much easier, right? It's so helpful. You can just import it as if you're importing a JavaScript variable. So let's just go take a look at app.css. We have a lot of stuff here that we don't really want. Let's just get rid of that. And we're just going to change the app class. Let's get rid of this. I'm going to use a display of flex over here. And I'm going to set the flex direction to a column. And let's check. That got us into a vertical list, but we don't want it to be like at the edge all the way over here. So let's maybe add some padding to this. Maybe 2M should be good enough. Yeah, nice little padding over here. Alright, that brings us to like a nice vertical list. Also, if you want to add numbers to these, all you have to do is change this div to an ordered list, and instead of anchor tags, use list items. And you will still want to use the anchor tag, but put them inside a list item. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. So instead of and there's an ordered list, right? So you get all these numbers. In fact, it's not looking that great, so maybe let's just bring this to the center. Instead of padding, and item center. That should bring it to the center. Yeah. So this is nice and centered. We can see what's going on over here. We have numbers. And that concludes our list of Pokemon. If you have any questions about this part, please feel free to ask. We're going to move on to routing in just a moment. Oops. Alright, so clearly some of you are slacking off because I'm expecting pretty much everyone to have doubts at this point, or you know React. If you do, good for you. If you notice this import logo, it's not really used right now, but if you notice this, we can import images and SVGs in the same way that we imported our CSS. And we can just use them inside image tags as we would normally. So React makes such things very simple. Why only Gen 1 Pokemon? A good question. I blame the API. I got the first 100 Pokemon. I could get others, so you could have something like offset equals 1000, and yeah, so see, now we're not getting Gen 1 Pokemon. Yeah, so anyway, logo is unused. Let's get rid of that and let's move on. At this point, I'm going to stop the npm start command that I was running, and that means our page will no longer refresh. And this because we actually want to run some commands over here. So what we're going to do is npm install react-router-dom. So what React Router does is it will handle all the page routing, the transitions, the changes, all that stuff. So whenever you want to have like multiple pages on different routes, like I showed, we're going to be using React Router DOM. Yeah, so now that we have React Router DOM, let's just go and start it up again, npm start. And now we're going to use components. So inside source, let's just create a new file called home.jsx. So you can use either .js extension or .jsx extension. I recommend using the .jsx extension for JSX components basically, and .js for like pure JavaScript files. So we're going to use the JSX, and oops. Yeah, I'm just using a small snippet for creating components, but yeah, that's basically it. We don't want any props right now, so let's just get rid of this props. And inside return, we're going to move all of this. Like we're just going to cut this. In fact, I forgot. Yeah. So, yeah, I forgot to also cut the import. So we're going to paste those imports in here as well. We don't need them in the other file. And now we have successfully extracted all of that. Like we don't want everything to be in one massive file. We want it to be split it into separate components so that managing our project becomes easier. And over here, we're going to return a browser router. So a browser router is, as it implies, it's just a router for your browser. So it's a component which is given to us by React Router DOM, and inside we can have like a switch. So what the switch will do is, based on the routes, it will render different components. For now, let's just add one route. And inside this route, let's pass in home. What this route path will be is slash. And we actually want it to be exact. So we only want to match exactly the slash path and nothing else. So as you can see at slash Charmander, we can't actually see anything. But when we go back to slash, we can see all those. Yeah, but that's because we don't have any routes for any other path apart from slash as of now. So let's fix that. Let's create a new page, a new component. Basically, every page is a component in that sense. Everything inside React is basically a component. So let's just create a new one, and let's just call it details.jsx. And over here, whoops, again. In fact, I'm just going to copy a lot of stuff over here from home, because we're going to reuse some of the same things. Yeah. So instead of making a request to this endpoint, we're going to be making a request to a different endpoint. And let's just change what this returns over here. We don't want to be returning a list of Pokemon. We just want to return name and maybe some details about that Pokemon. We don't need to import React from React. Unused import. Right. So if you're noticing, we are passing in the name of the Pokemon right here in the URL. So we can actually access that using React Router DOM. And the way to access that is using some destructuring syntax. Let's just let's call it name. Const name is equals use params. This is another hook because it starts with use. So use params. What this is basically going to do is it's going to take the parameters from our URL and it'll make it accessible inside a React component. And how do we actually match the names of these parameters? Like how do we know that it's going to be called name? Because as you can see, there's no information over here as to what the component should be, sorry, the parameter should be called. And the place we do that is inside our route. So let's just define another route. And we're going to render details. Oops. Oh, I forgot to name this details. Yeah. I'm going to import that. And we don't want it to be like, yeah, we want it to be like this. But now inside this route, we don't want it to be an exact match because remember we're passing in a variable now. We don't need it to be exact. So we're going to pass in a path equals a string / name. And this is where we define the parameter name. So anything that is a colon and anything that comes after that, this is what our parameter is going to be called. So over here we can destructure it out of use params. So you could also do something like const params and then use params dot name, but destructuring makes it so much more simpler. Don't you agree? Anyway, so now that we have the name, let's see if we're actually getting it. Let's console log it out. This is going to cause problems, so let's just keep an empty div over here for now. Yeah, and let's go check the console. Ignore all those errors, they're fixed now. Let's just reload. Yeah, so we see the name of the Pokemon that we're actually passing in through the URL over here. It's turning up, we are getting it, so that's good. We're going to use this name to fetch details about that Pokemon. And to see how to do that, we're going to go back to the API. So as you can see here, if we do /Pokemon name, it'll get us details about that particular Pokemon. So let's just copy this. And uncomment this. So instead of /Pokemon, we're going to convert this to a JavaScript string interpolation syntax / curly braces, as we did in the anchor tag in the previous component. We're just going to pass in the name over here, and we're going to set the Pokemon. And as you can see, now we have a warning. It has a missing dependency of name. So this is because we are actually using name. As I told you, we're using this name inside our use effect hook. So we better pass in that dependency. So anytime the name will change, this API call will be made again. Yeah. So now we are setting the Pokemon to the body. But we don't have anything called results over here, so let's just set it to just body, just like that. And we can console log this body now. Sorry, not body, the Pokemon. Yeah. And we get a JavaScript object. We have a lot of information about abilities, base experience, name, all that stuff. So you can use whatever details you want of this. We're just going to use a few basic ones. Let's just create a h1 tag, a header. Inside we're going to pass Pokemon dot name. Then just a B tag. Let's just see what all data we have. We have names, we have stuff like stats, weight. Yeah, let's put in weight for whatever reason. Showing names might be problematic, so how about height? And some other stuff like the order. And some other stuff like the base experience. That should be enough for like a status page. So let's go and take a look at it right now and see what it's giving us. Yeah, that's pretty good, right? We're getting all these details, but as you can see, for a moment while this is being fetched, we are actually getting blank syntax over here. Like, sorry, we're just getting blank over here. I don't really want that. That doesn't seem so good, right? We don't want that to happen. So what we can actually do over here is we can use conditional rendering. We can do stuff like if Pokemon, if not Pokemon, so if there is nothing inside Pokemon, it's just an empty array, then we want to return just a small little div that says loading. So if we reload now, you might not have caught it because it's like loading a bit too fast, but it does show us loading for a moment there. Anyway, now that we have conditional rendering and we have all this stuff here, we can just go ahead and style it a bit. So let's create a new file. Let's call it details.css. And let's add in a container. Display flex direction, column, justify content center, align items center. That should do it for the details. Now we can give this a class name of details, but this still won't make a difference because we have not imported our file. So we can just go ahead and import /details.css. Oh, okay. Something went wrong over here. So the class is being set, but we're not actually getting the styles. Interesting. Oh, that's right. I said the wrong class name. So we have to call it container. Yeah, and that makes it nice and centered for us over here. That should be enough for styling. You know, we're not actually building anything super beautiful right now. We just want to see how it's actually done. And I think that concludes the building of our application. But what I thought would be interesting is after building this, we should also see how to actually deploy it so that other people will be able to use it. And we're going to do that just now. Yeah, and if you've attended our Git sessions, you know how to use Git. So what we're going to do over here is we're going to add all the stuff that we changed. Git add. Excuse me if I'm using my short commands. I'm very used to this. So git add dot. Git status shows us all of this stuff. So that's all right. Git commit -s. So let's just call it initial commit. I don't know. I mean, we haven't, this is just the first commit, right? So yeah, we have created the first commit. And now we're actually going to create a Git repository So you can either use GitHub for that. Yeah, shameless plug, this is my GitHub, feel free to follow me. So we're just going to create a new repository over here, and we're going to call it, let's just say, my site. Description, call it whatever. I'm going to create this repository. And over here, just going to git push whatever your branch name is. So yeah, now we have pushed it here, and we have all of our React code available. And if you're confused about how to use this README contains it was created along with the application, so it will tell you how to get started, how to start the application and things like that. Anyway, on to deploying. So what we're going to be using is a platform called Netlify. So if we just go over to app.netlify.com, you might have to log in. If you're not, I am already logged in. So I'm just going to click on this button that says new site from Git. So connecting to Git provider. This is very straightforward. We're going to connect to GitHub. This will ask us to log in. I'm already logged in. So yeah, now we're going to search our repos. So mine is called my app. Sorry, my site. Excuse me. Yeah, my site. Now it's going to ask you which branch you want to use for actually deploying. So you can have multiple branches, and you can only decide to deploy from one of them. And the build command that we're going to be using is so since I have yarn installed, it's showing me yarn build, but you can also use npm run build. It'll work just as fine, and this is what I'm actually going to use. And the publish directory. So this is where like all the build resources will go. So by default, when we run, let's just take a look at all the directories here. We don't have any build directory over here, right? So when we run npm run build, what React does is it creates a production build. Like it will remove all unused resources. It will make the size nice and small, and it'll make it very performant. And it will create like a directory called build. So if we look at it, we get a build directory over here, and this is where your site is basically. So if you go into build, we can see a bunch of stuff. We have index.html, a few favicons, robots.txt file, all that good stuff. So yeah, we have all that stuff, and this is where our site will be deployed from. So this is a publish directory, and we're going to deploy the site right now. If you want to look at the progress at how it's building, we can actually check the deploy log. It's installing all our dependencies right now. Yeah, so it says build script success, and that means our site has been built successfully. And to check it out, we can click on this preview deploy over here. And yeah, that will take us to our site over here. Let's try clicking on one of these. And here we have a problem that we see thanks to React being a single page application. It has only one index.html file. And when we tried to click on this link, what happened was it tried to go to /Bulbasaur, and what Netlify thought is that, okay, this guy is looking for bulbasaur.html, because that's how mostly web servers work. So now we have to do something to tell Netlify that we don't want like we only have one index.html file. So we have to set up some redirects, like everything will be redirected to index.html. And for that, Netlify allows us to use a very simple syntax. We're just going to create one file which will fix it for us. So the file name is called _redirects, and we're going to put it in our public, this directory called public. We're going to create a new file, _redirects, and the content that you want to put in here is going to be /star/index.html 200. So what this is basically doing is it's telling Netlify that anything, like literally any route, we want to redirect to /index.html with a status code of 200, which is like an okay status code, no problems detected status code. So yeah, now we have created this new file. Let's git add it and git commit -s. Let's call it fix deploy add redirects for Netlify. Now I want to push it. We're going to call the same command for pushing. Yeah, and that should have pushed. So as you can see, now it's building our site again. So now this is something very convenient about Netlify. Like whenever you push a new commit, it will rebuild and redeploy your site. So you don't have to manually click on deploy every single time. Once you have linked it, it'll just keep doing it on its own. And now we can wait for it to complete. No, we have a question on YouTube. You don't have to run npm run build and put it in Netlify. In fact, the build directory should not even be put on GitHub or Git in general. So you just need to tell Netlify to run npm run build, like over here inside our configuration deploy settings. You see this build command, you just need to tell Netlify that the build command is npm run build, and you also need to tell it that the published directory is called build. In general, Netlify will auto detect this, so you don't have to set it manually. You're pretty much all set. You just have to tell it your GitHub repo, and it'll do the rest. Yeah, anyway, let's take a look at our build. Yeah, and it's actually up right now. Let's go over here and check it out. So our site is loaded. And now let's try clicking on one of these links. And yeah, it's actually working. So the redirects worked. And that is how to deploy to Netlify. If you have any questions about it, please ask right now. Alright, I guess no one has any questions. So that concludes our session. I hope you learned how to use React, what React is, and why we should use React. And I hope you also are clear on how to actually deploy your site so that other people will be able to view it, how you can share your site with other people. And now you can use React to build any web application you want. You can use it to build a portfolio. You can use it to build a complex web application for a client, anything you want. React is a very flexible framework, and I hope it serves you well. That concludes our session. Thank you for joining.
Hello.
Yeah.